Welcome to Unbound, the podcast with Beth Curry, author, storyteller, and survivor. This is where books meet real life, where Beth reads chapters from her work and breaks free from the traditional audiobook format, diving deeper into the personal experiences, lessons, and liberation behind every page. Nothing is off limits. Let's get unbound.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Season 3 of Unbound. Today we're stepping into a chapter that sits at a crossroads. You know, that strange place between childhood and high school where everything feels like it's supposed to change, but nothing inside you has caught up yet. This is that season in life when you're desperate to become someone new, yet you're still kind of dragging around the echoes of who you used to be. It's like the perfect storm for reinvention and for vulnerability. Because like me, when you've spent years being ignored or dismissed or shamed, the first person who finally sees you or seems to can feel like a lifeline, even when they're not. This is chapter 4 in the book called Don't Rock the Boat. I thought I'd finally caught a break. The braces were off, revealing teeth that were actually straight and white instead of the crooked mess they'd been before. My skin had cleared up dramatically. Still not perfect, but human-looking again instead of the walking scab I'd been for years. For the first time since elementary school, I could look in the mirror without wanting to cry. But being the fat kid with a face full of scabs for 3 years, when the scabs heal, people don't forget what you look like. Even when you smile and your teeth are straight, you're still the girl who missed months of school because she was too ugly to be seen in public. I also had a new curse plaguing me, literally. The last week of grade 7, during a baseball game with my class and our male teacher, I got my first period. I was wearing pale pink shorts, too. That experience was so fun. I'm sure you can tell that was dripping with sarcasm. That first period led to years of irregular cycles, heavy bleeding, anemia, and fainting, just to make sure I knew I could never feel like all the normal girls. High school was supposed to be my fresh start, but I was still carrying all the weight, literal and metaphorical, of everything that had happened before. The summer between grade 8 and high school should have been exciting. Instead, I spent most of it hanging out with Kelly and Sally, eating too much and trying to convince myself that things would be different in September. Kelly and I had perfected the art of doing absolutely nothing together. We'd lie on the lawn for hours, talking girl talk, watching soap operas, getting into trouble, making up stories about the neighbors, planning futures that seemed impossibly far away, especially for her as she was a couple years younger than me. She never made me feel like I needed to be different or better or smaller. With Kelly, I could just exist. Even when I would get creative with my storytelling back then, she would do it right back, but in such a way I knew she knew. Looking back, I realized I was really testing things and gaining experience for a decade I didn't know was coming, and she was my friend through it all. Sally brought a different energy to our little group. She was still figuring out how to be Canadian, still missing England, still dealing with her own outsider status, but she had this way of seeing things, like she wasn't weighed down by all the social rules that the rest of us had internalized. She'd ask questions that seemed obvious once she said them. Why do those girls get to decide who's popular? Or who made up these stupid rules anyway? She was the cool chick, still is, confident, a little sassy, but still compassionate. The three of us didn't always hang out together, but when we did, we made sense together. We were all outsiders in our own ways, all trying to figure out where we fit, all grateful to have found people who didn't require us to be anyone other than who we were. But I still wanted more. I still watched the popular girls from a distance, studying how they moved through the world with such confidence. I still wondered what it would feel like to walk into a room and know that people were happy to see you instead of hoping they wouldn't notice you at all. I still believed that if I could just fix enough things about myself, I could earn my way into their world. The weight was my biggest enemy and my most faithful companion. Every pound I gained felt like another barrier between me and the life I wanted, but food was also the only thing that made me feel better when that life felt impossibly far away. I'd eat when I was bored, I'd eat when I was sad, I'd eat when I was happy, just to make the happiness last longer. I'd eat when I was stressed about school, when I was worried about fitting in, when I was lying in bed at night wondering if things would ever get easier. Food was reliable in a way that people weren't. Food didn't judge me or reject me or make me feel like I wasn't good enough. Food was comfort that I could control, unlike everything else in my life that seemed determined to stay just out of reach. But every bite came with guilt. Every meal came with the voice in my head, reminding me that this was why I didn't fit in, why I wasn't pretty, why I would never be the girl boys noticed or other girls wanted to be friends with. I was caught in a cycle I didn't know how to break, eating to feel better about being fat, then feeling worse about being fat because I'd eaten, round and round, getting bigger and more miserable with each rotation. My parents tried to help in their clumsy, well-meaning way. Mom would buy diet books and suggest we eat healthier together. Dad would mention how good I looked when I wore certain colors or styles, trying to boost my confidence without directly addressing the elephant in the room. But mostly, we all just pretended it wasn't happening. We pretended I was just going through a phase, or still growing into my body, or any of the other euphemisms people use when they don't want to acknowledge that a kid is drowning right in front of them. I learned to keep the peace by keeping my problems to myself. Don't make waves. Don't create drama. Don't force anyone to deal with things they'd rather ignore. It was easier for everyone if I just stayed quiet about how much I was struggling. That summer, I started noticing Brandon around the neighborhood more often. He wasn't hard to miss, taller, confident, with that easy smile that made you feel like you were in on some private joke. He'd be walking down the street or hanging out at the corner store, always seeming like he belonged wherever he was. Sometimes he'd nod or wave when he saw me, the kind of casual acknowledgement that older kids sometimes gave to younger ones in small neighborhoods. Nothing special, nothing that made me think he even knew my name. But I noticed him. There was something about the way he carried himself that I envied, like he'd never spent a day of his life wondering if he was good enough or trying to figure out where he fit. Like the world had always made space for him, and he'd never had to fight for his place in it. I wondered what that felt like. I also wondered if he remembered me from the high school orientation, if he'd filed me away in his memory as just another nervous grade 8 kid, if he thought about any of us at all once we walked back to our elementary school. Probably not. Why would he? But still, when I saw him around the neighborhood that summer, I'd find myself standing a little straighter, hoping I looked older than I was, hoping I looked like someone worth noticing. I had no idea he was already watching me. I had no idea that every casual wave, every friendly nod, every moment I thought he was just being nice to a neighbor kid was actually part of something much more calculated. I thought he was just a cute older boy who lived nearby. I thought if he paid attention to me at all, it was because I was finally becoming someone. I had no idea I was being hunted. August was winding down when he approached me on St. Clair Circle. I was walking through the park in the middle of the circle, probably heading to Sally's house, when I heard someone call my name. "Hey, it's Beth, right? From MM?" I turned around and there he was, Brandon, looking even cuter than I remembered, with a summer tan and that confident smile that made my stomach flip in ways I didn't entirely understand. "Yeah," I managed, trying to sound casual instead of surprised that he knew my name. "I thought so. You ready for high school? Pretty exciting, right?" We talked for maybe 10 minutes, standing in the middle of the park while the late summer sun filtered through the trees around us. He asked about what classes I was taking, what I was nervous about, whether I'd made friends with any other new kids from the orientation, the ones outside my class. He was easy to talk to, really listening when I spoke, asking follow-up questions, making me feel like my answers actually mattered to him. When I made a joke about being terrified of getting lost in the hallways, he laughed like it was genuinely funny instead of just politely humoring me. "You'll be fine," he said, and something about the way he said it made me believe him. "If you ever need help finding anything, or if anyone gives you trouble, just let me know. I look out for the good kids." The good kids. He thought I was one of the good kids. "Thanks," I said, probably blushing, definitely feeling more flattered than I had any right to be. "I mean it," he said, and his voice got a little more serious. "High school can be rough if you don't have people watching out for you, but you seem like someone worth watching out for." When he walked away, I stood in that park for another 5 minutes, replaying every word of our conversation, analyzing every smile and gesture for hidden meaning. An older boy, a cute, confident, popular older boy, had sought me out. He had remembered my name, had called me one of the good kids, had offered to look out for me. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I was finally becoming the person I'd always wanted to be. Maybe high school really would be different. Maybe I was finally ready to leave behind the scared, ugly, unpopular girl I'd been and step into someone new. Maybe I was worth protecting. Maybe I was worth noticing. Maybe I was worth caring about. I walked home feeling lighter than I had in months, already imagining how different my life was about to become. I still had no idea that everything I'd survived up to this point had been preparing me to be the perfect victim. I had no idea that the boy who'd just promised to protect me was the one I'd need protection from. All I knew was that someone had finally looked at me and seen something worthy of literally anything, and that felt like everything. What's actually true? Adolescence is when we start testing boundaries and developing our authentic selves, but trauma survivors often learn to suppress this natural development to avoid triggering dangerous people in their lives. When you're living with a predator, authenticity becomes dangerous. Every genuine emotion, every boundary, every moment of self-advocacy can be used against you. Your instinct to not rock the boat wasn't weakness or compliance, it was your nervous system recognizing that expressing your true self could result in harm. The hypervigilance about others' moods, the constant emotional temperature taking, the way you learn to manage everyone else's comfort at the expense of your own, these were survival skills. But survival skills that keep you alive in dangerous situations can keep you small in safe ones. Learning when to use these skills and when to set them aside is part of healing. What part of yourself did you learn to hide to keep peace? What would it feel like to express that part of yourself now in safer relationships? Permission slip. I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to have needs, opinions, and boundaries. I am allowed to express my authentic self without managing everyone else's reaction to it. I'm allowed to rock the boat when the boat needs rocking. Your job isn't to keep everyone else comfortable. Your job is to live authentically. This week, express one authentic part of yourself that you've been hiding. Notice what happens when you stop managing other people's comfort with your realness. Okay, so what stands out most in this chapter isn't just the body shame, the longing, or the insecurity that I was feeling. Those are almost universal adolescent experiences, right? What strikes me is how early emotional training sets the stage for who we trust and why. There's a psychological principle called wound matching. It means that the vulnerabilities that we carry often determine the people we're drawn to and the people who are drawn to us. So kids who learn early to avoid conflict, to smooth things over, to not take up space, they often attract people who benefit from exactly those traits. So predators understand this instinctively. They look for kids who've been conditioned to ignore their own discomfort. And that's why grooming so often starts with attention that feels like relief. When you've lived in a body you've been taught to apologize for, and someone comes along and makes you feel chosen, it doesn't feel dangerous at all. It feels redemptive. It feels like the universe is finally correcting an imbalance or something. And the real cruelty is, grooming doesn't begin with fear. It begins with validation. And that's what makes it so fucking hard to see. Also, something powerful here in this chapter about the weight of old identities. Even when your skin clears and your braces come off, the emotional imprint of being the ugly kid or the fat kid doesn't disappear. Our bodies heal faster than our self-concepts do. And a predator could spot that gap instantly. This chapter also highlights a psychological trap that many trauma survivors fall into. When you've learned to not rock the boat, even kindness feels like a test that you have to pass. Isn't that sad? You monitor your expressions, you manage other people's comfort, and you shrink your needs, and you become the good kid because being good feels like protection. Predators, though, they don't choose kids who are weak. They choose kids who are deeply loyal and deeply hopeful and deeply yearning for someone to finally select them. And the hardest truth about that is predators don't create vulnerability. They exploit the vulnerability created by everyone who failed you first. Awful. I think that's so sad. And for adults listening to this, it's worth noticing those echoes. Like, do you still not rock the boat? Do you still shrink to keep the peace? Do you still choose comfort for others before safety for yourself. These are patterns that often began long before the predator ever appeared, whatever that predator may be. Healing means learning to tell the difference between peace and silence, and between safety and appeasement, between being valued and being targeted. The child in this chapter didn't know that, but the adult listening now does, or is learning. And that is pretty much where transformation begins. That's it. A little short episode here. Thank you so much for being here. Please make sure to follow me wherever you listen to me, so when new episodes come out, you will be notified. All episodes of Unbound are free. If you want to support the production costs at all, you can find all the information to do that in the show notes. If you join the Facebook group, we sometimes have further conversation on episodes there as well. So yeah, check it out. Everything's in the show notes, and I will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Unbound with Beth Curry. Join the conversation in the Facebook group or visit author.bethcurry.com. Want to support the show? Head to ko-fi.com/Unbound Podcast. Until next time, stay unbound.